Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Ayman for another review for another new release. And this is, of course, Black Adam, starring Dwayne The Rock Johnson, of course, in cinemas worldwide now for everybody to have watched this weekend. But before we get into any of that sort of stuff, Ayman, how are we doing tonight?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Can't complain. How are you, George?
I'm very well, thank you, by the football and F1 results. But aside from that, um, yeah, it's gonna be a fun one. I think that's one of them was Avatar, wasn't it, a few weeks ago? So at least we've got something
Yes.
new to
Yeah.
talk about. So everybody at home, if you have seen Black Adam, this is going to run as a spoiler review. I'm going to be blunt. There isn't much to spoil, given they actually spoiled the credit scene a week before the film came out. But we want to still hear from you anyway. So please do comment below your thoughts on Black Adam. If you have seen the film, if you haven't seen the film, if you plan on seeing it, we are curious to hear about this. So please do get involved, whether you're watching live or you are watching later on down the line. We will reply to those messages. And if you're a fan of this film or review, there might be many more others on the way for DC. Don't actually know what the next DC or Shazam, January, I think. They keep changing its release date. So there's more DC to come in a few months. But before we get into that as well, please follow us on our social medias if you want to find out about more of our videos, what we're up to. Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinema savvy. A link to Redbubble is in the description where you can pick up some of our merch. We've had a lot of videos go up the last few days. We had the Banshees of Inisherin yesterday, Glass Onion on Friday, Andor last week, this tonight, House of Dragons tomorrow. There's a lot of things happening, and the best way to keep up to date is getting us on social media. So please do follow us on there. But with all the polite introductory stuff aside, Eamon, I'm going to jump over to you first, actually. I was wondering your thoughts on maybe Black Adam heading into this film, maybe when the film was announced, The Rock being cast, anything like that leading up to it. Tell us your story and your if you're connected to or whatever. It's an interesting one.
So, I can remember I can remember the sort of time where The Rock was cast because that was years before this film actually came out. I think it was after the Batfleck film came out. I think he was cast then, which was going back years now. But Black Adam as a character, it's really interesting to me because he's not a villain as like the normal, like he's not like the Joker or like the Riddler or anything like that. He's not a proper villain like that, but he's more of a anti-hero because he's essentially a hero to the people of Conduct. Um, so I find him as a character really interesting. The way the Rock portrays it is different, to put it politely. But yeah, going into the film, I was really interested. I think I was more interested than you were, but I had I I had higher hopes than you had, basically. Um, but yeah, coming out of it, it was a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a massive fan of wrestling, The Rock was my favorite wrestler when I was
Mm.
younger. Him, Batista, CM Punk. He came back in 2012. Fast and Furious ones had been out, and I started rewatching wrestling again. And I'd always enjoyed his rise in Hollywood. I didn't mind some of his Disney films. I know that when you're younger and whatnot, all that sort of stuff, but he's been an interesting one of his films. And I think if anyone's been here long enough, there was a terrible series I did many years ago called The Rockathon, where I was going to try and go through every film The Rock had ever done. This was like 2017, maybe 2016. He'd done like 30 odd by then, and I was so much on the Rock hype train. And it's been the last few years I've really like not gone off him because it sounds a bit unfair. I think he's just become a branded PR megalomaniac. So with this film, I mean, DC aside, I'm not. I think because of stuff like Venom, Morbius, all these anti-hero films. I know that there's just two obvious Sony ones. I'm very bored of this. I'm evil. I don't take prisoners. I've been XYZ ABC for so long, and I think the overdrive of hype narrative for this. I don't know if you're familiar with the catchphrase "the hierarchy of power is about to change,"
Yeah.
which The Rock has made his marketing stooge for this for about 2 years now, and it's just become so tiresome. Heading into this film, I only had one shining light that I was looking forward to, which was Pierce Brosnan. For anyone curious, I went to the red carpet in London on Tuesday. Actually, friend of the channel Neil was there, who got who was at a few events. So please do check out Get Your Comic Con as well. But yeah, I didn't meant to try and meet Piers Brosnan. I got very close, not close enough, unfortunately. And I met The Rock, one of my heroes, and I just didn't care. And I was like, "Fucking hell, George!" Like me of 5 years ago would have like had a panic attack and screeching. So I'm in this weird bubble now where I don't want to sound like one of those broken people moaning on Twitter, but I'm just very, very tired of comic book stuff. I said ironically that our history. I've known you for how many years, but we'll still watch the film. I'm looking forward to Black Panther. But I'm just tired of the same things. And when this film was coming out, when the leak started coming out, when you leak a credit scene the day it's had its first screening, not even its world premiere, to me, that's a controlled narrative that they knew what they were doing. And then at the premiere in LA the next day, every question was about Henry Cavill. And I don't mind spoiling that because this is going to be a spoiler review, as I kind of said. And when the only talking point of the film is Henry Cavill's post-credit scene cameo. You're in a bit of a lull as to how far the film goes, but what I have seen is a lot of people on social media just, when I say having fun with this, the best tweet I saw was someone saying the reaction to Black Adam is what Sony thought the reaction to Morbius was with the memes, everyone taking the piss. This one's been more legitimate, that people have gone and watched this film and then took the piss out of the film. So yeah, I'm in this weird narrative where I don't even want to say neutral. Like, as you said, I wasn't looking forward to it heading in. We saw it on Friday, and I was more excited for Banshees of Inisherin, which was after. So yeah, it's a weird one for me because normally I'm pretty, these sort of generic action blockbusters I would normally have a lot of fun with. I'm all for switching my brain off, having a good time. But I think there was something about this where I feel like I'm tired of DC. I'm tired of The Rock. I'm tired of a lot of things going into this, the dark brooding hero type stuff that I just think is so massively overdone at the moment. I just was quite neutral. I mean, we sat there watching it and there were points when I was laughing. I don't know if you'd have heard it. Like,
don't think so.
There are certain moments, when The Rock, they used like an awful sort of, not a GoPro, but it might as well be a GoPro camera on The Rock's head when he was flying around. Yeah. And it was a very peculiar angle. I just started laughing, and there were some things. We've got Derby Gamer saying, I don't plan on seeing it as a DC fan. That's fine. It's not going to change much. You've already seen online the ending. So literally nothing happened except the credit scene in terms of looking forward for yourself at DC. But I'm tired of being boring already, so let's just jump into it. Okay, let's talk The Rock, which is ironic because I've just had a speech on him. All prejudice aside, what I said, this is his life's work. This is his 15-year project, he calls it. And for me, my analogy of Fast and Furious is bloody fantastic because Vin Diesel took it so seriously. It was Vin Diesel's Shakespeare. It's his life. It's his life's work. That's what he wants his legacy to be. And it's so fucking stupid. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's why Fast and Furious works. And the genius of Fast and Furious is that The Rock and everybody else is in on the joke except Vin Diesel. No one else is taking it seriously like Vin Diesel. And that's why they work so well. That it's like one of them films that if you took, the Twitter memes, if you could replace a film with Muppets by one character, it'd be like Vin Diesel and Fast and Furious. And this film for me came full circle with The Rock. This to me was The Rock's life's work. Every scene, every bit of acting he did was him trying to be involved, him trying to do that sort of process. And I thought he was terrible in it. I don't like shitting on actors, I just didn't care. I thought, if I'm going to be blunt, but maybe two or three supporting actors, I thought the whole cast was abysmal. I'm going to hand over to you because I'm just going to let myself have a think before I say something I regret.
I mean, yeah, I can understand this. Like, it definitely looks like it's a passion project for The Rock. Because he's been cast for so long. He, whilst you're watching the film, you can tell that he had a major hand in it. Because it is, The Rock has this sort of thing where you can tell when it's a Rock film because there is just so much action. Like when they did that Fast and Furious spin-off, you can tell that was a Rock film because it's not a lot of story and it's just a lot of action. There's the same with this. Like, there's so much that they could have done better, but yeah, you just don't care about what's happening. If you switch your brain off and don't think about the story and just want to watch action scenes, it'd be okay. But then with that, you're better off just watching something like Man of Steel if you're a DC fan,
Yeah.
because the action set pieces in that film are better than what they are in here. Um, yeah, it's just one of those. Like, I was disappointed coming out of it because I liked Black Adam as a character, but this was like The Rock with superpowers. It wasn't Black Adam essentially, which was, yeah, it's disappointing.
And that's it. Like, you know the comics better than me. And if the Rock to come around ever saying this is the character I've always strived to be, this is the
Mm,
person that I see myself in, this is who I grew up reading. A lot of actors do say that when they take these roles. I'm not saying actors lie, some do, and you can understand a lot of them genuinely have that affection towards them. I think, although I'm not as big a fan of Tom Holland as Spider-Man, you
mm,
can tell that's someone that's grown up with Tobey Maguire, with Andrew Garfield, that has a big impact on him. And even Brosnan will talk about the bonds. He always said,
mm,
I grew up with James Bond. Connery was my hero. I created my character based off Connery and more together. And with this of The Rock, everything he said about it, at not one point did I ever look at this film and think this is The Rock becoming another character. This was The Rock being The Rock.
yeah.
It's The Rock with lightning and
Mm,
super speed and power and all this sort of weird stuff. And actually, one thing I want to really kick off of, which something really annoyed me, and I don't care about spoilers, but in the same trailer that was plastered at the cinema for the last 5 months, he says, "My son died to save me and protect our people." Blah blah blah.
mm,
That was in this film a massive twist 3/4 of the way in, and I
yeah.
just didn't understand why. Maybe it's a criticism of modern trailers, but even if there was anybody with an inkling of trying to be involved, trying to find out more, it just never worked because the only story was already sort of spoiled in advance by him. So I think
Yeah.
even his character arc, I mean, when they do the revelation that, oh, he was the guy talking to the son at the start, we could
Mm,
see that was The Rock. And then I think what did make me laugh as well was the terrible CGI of putting The Rock's face onto someone that just isn't ripped.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And after a few times, and it shouldn't be funny in that respect, but it was just so artificial. It reminded me of, like, in The Mummy 2 when he appears as the Scorpion King, and
Mm,
that's like
oh yeah.
regarded, as it's regarded as one of the worst CGI things ever. But in its respect, it was the early days of 2002 CGI.
Mm,
It kind of looked like that to me. That it was just awful, and I just don't think with his character there's ever any depth to him. There's no meaning. He just tells us he's a badass. We get to see him kill a few people and melt
mm,
people and be horrible and rip them in two, etc., etc. I just was just utterly bored by it, and
mm,
it's weird because DC, although I'm hating on it, I prefer DC to Marvel. I think I've seen in the past when I used to read comics, I thought
mm,
DC comics were far more superior to Marvel comics. I think the best of DC films are still the best comic hero films. Dark
mm.
Knight trilogy. I still feel they're more interesting characters. The concepts of these are gods rather than heroes. Um, and yet this to me feels like the most like Marvel-esque film of the lot. And I know we've spoken in the
Yeah.
past that we both really enjoy Shazam. And I think the
Mm,
same thing that Man of Steel is probably my favorite of the DCEU or the
yeah.
Suicide
Same.
Squads. And which in my respect are all different from one another. I just don't like this new copy and paste on, and it just feels like The Rock saw Man of Steel and was like, just let me do my version of this. And
Mm,
I don't know. I just struggles to gravitate towards his character because to me there was nothing interesting about him. We knew The Rock would come out and kick ass and save the day, and I don't need that false sense of security that this character could get hurt.
yeah.
But I think it's reached a point in all his films where I just don't care. I really enjoyed Jungle Cruise. Actually, now I've said that, but I just feel he's become so repetitive. It's really sort of taken me off watching him and stuff. Is that me being unfair?
No, I think that makes sense because whenever The Rock is in a film now, it's The Rock and the cast. He doesn't blend well. It's always like he has to be center stage. I mean, I get it because he is such a big box office draw to most like casual movie viewers, but you still need to blend into the like not blend in, but sort of have the cast as a whole rather than having The Rock and then the cast. Like that doesn't work.
No, it's a good point, and I think certainly you mentioned Hobbs and Shaw earlier. At least
Mm,
that was sort of joint billing that worked
yeah,
again. It was that comedy action style. It wasn't them being deadly super serious about what it is that's happening. We've got a lot of comments by Deppy Gaming. I'll try and go through a few of them later on. But we've spoken about The Rock, and we spoke. I guess we want to talk about the Justice Society. So I'm not familiar with these, bar Injustice. I know the concept of them, but I guess if we just go through quickly, right? Who we have Hawkman, played by Aldous Hodge, Atom Smasher by Noah Centineo. We have, Cyclone by Quintessa Swindle, and of course, Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate. I'm not going to go through them each individually. Certainly, I think it's worth having a chat on Hawkman and
yep,
Dr. Fate, who I think are the best two supporting
mm,
characters. I actually will go as far as say I think those two are the best relationship in this film.
definitely.
Um, they are very much a relationship forged out of respect for one another. They've obviously been friends for however many decades. They've clearly, and this is something that I think is really interesting with DC, that because their universe is so infunctionable, they can just introduce the
Mm,
Justice Society and be like, these guys have been friends with. I can believe that. I can go with that.
yeah,
I respect that you're just getting on with it. You're not going to do a setup film to then bring them in. And I can. That's easy. It did look a lot like X-Men. I'm not going to lie with the Garden. I don't know if
yeah,
that's part of
yeah,
Justice Society, if that's always been a thing, but yeah, it's one of them where I just think there was more there between them. I thought Aldous Hodge, I've not seen him in anything before. I really enjoyed him. But to me, this is Pierce Brosnan's film. I think he's the only character that actually has a functioning character arc where we're introduced to him as a tortured old individual. He's wary of the days and years he's lived cursed by a helmet, and he sees the vision of his friend dying and wants to go about his own way in correcting that issue. I think that's quite a noble character arc, and it's
mm,
compelling. And I think it's the only character that actually gets a character arc in itself that functions the film and story. So I'm just going to quickly get out of the way that Pierce Brosnan to me is my MVP for the film.
yeah. Same. I'm Pierce Brosnan. I'm not as hyped as you are about him. Like, I do respect that he is a really good actor. But yeah, I definitely agree that Hawkman and Pierce Brosnan as Doctor Fate, they work so well together. You can tell, like, even if they don't. I mean, there are bits where they do say that they've been friends for so many years, but it's believable that they have been around for so long together. Um, Cyclone was additionally like she was okay. I didn't mind her character.
Yeah.
Atom Smasher, he was definitely just there as comic relief to be part of that team. Um, I feel they could have done a lot more with Hawkman and Doctor Fate as characters because Doctor Fate is so powerful. They had to nerf him for this film because of how powerful he is. Um, and the fact that Doctor Fate dies, I mean, I get why because Pierce Brosnan obviously wouldn't. He doesn't want to be around for any of the DC films if they were going to carry on with using him. But I would have liked to see Hawkman die instead, just because you get that. Like there are a few nods to his origins and stuff like that, like the fact that he's been around for thousands of years. They mentioned that the ship is made out of nth metal, stuff like that. But I would like to see him die just so that you can reveal that he does come back to life and like play on that character a little bit more. And the fact that they made him dying such a big part, it's really inconsequential to his character because he's not dead. He just comes back to life. So it's one of those. Um, yeah, the JSA was interesting. It was interesting that they chose those members out of all the others they could have chosen. But yeah, it's like you said, the fact that they brought them in and it was believable. It's just the DCEU doesn't work, so you can throw in any old characters and you'll believe that they've been there from day dot, basically.
Yeah, and I think with this film, it's really interesting. When I've spoken to a few people, they've thought this is a Marvel film, and I think we're in this era now where there's obviously so much media on superhero stuff, and obviously Marvel's been so successful in its own right. Any character that isn't Superman, Wonder Woman, or Batman, everyone just thinks is Marvel, that isn't DC, and I think it goes to show where they failed as a branding is that people just don't know the difference between the two. And I think even this film coming out, it's at a point where there's been nothing up for a while. We'll talk about its box office ever so slightly in a bit, but as you said, it just feels inconsequential, and the whole film just feels like set up for something else. And that's why I'm kind of sort of, again, if The Rock spent 15 years trying to this film to come together, like this is it, like this is the best you've got. 15 years of planning a film, and it is this. I just think it is such a waste, and I'm just bored of the whole thing. I think and I don't like coming on to shit on franchises because I would love for DC to do well. The Batman's been one of my favorite films of this year, and that's because you have somebody coming on board, i.e., Matt Reeves, with a vision. He knows what he wants to do. He wants to build his own world. He wants to do it in a certain way, a style. He knows how to tell stories, and then he brings on his key players. Whereas for The Rock, for this is his ego coming on board and saying, "Hey, I want to do a film." And I was going to say, has Marvel ever done that? Marvel are having this happen. Of course, we're going to have Blade with Mahershala Ali. I know it's been delayed another year. I know that they're going to do a rewrite. But it was Mahershala Ali coming to them saying, "I want to do a Blade film." But the difference between Mahershala Ali, yes, he's not an A-lister, but he's a 2-time Oscar winner, one of the most credible actors in the game right now. And Marvel is at a point in their universe where they can start doing more interesting character tales, character pieces. And I think that's the big thing for me, where although The Rock is big, he's a brand, as I've said, he's one of the biggest wrestlers of all time. I don't think DC was ever ready for Black Adam to go ahead, and for him doing interviews saying, they didn't want to do it, they were waiting. Now we've got a new DC boss, etc., etc. I'm just there like the reason they weren't going to do it is because they didn't need to do it yet. Me and you spoke after the film. I know it was briefly because I had a double bill, but it was like, moving forwards, Black Adam should be against Shazam. And that, in theory, should have been Shazam 2. When we spoke about it, that Shazam, either Black Adam should have waited till after Shazam 2, the new Shazam, then do it, or Black Adam should have been out much earlier with Shazam to then have it as the sequel. And the way these schedules worked is that both films end up releasing 5 months aside, and there's no plan because it's DC. And that's the problem they face, is that there's no structure in the organization within the company. And kind of, it just feels like this within this film that I mentioned there's no consequence. I want to talk about the action because and again, I'm just going to sound like I'm moaning. I thought the action was atrocious. I don't mind an anti-hero killing people. It can be great. But when it happens so much, you just like, again, the film stops. You get like 5 minutes dialogue. Okay, now we're going to have another action scene and just have people fighting and fighting and fighting. And they're trying to have Hawkman have a conversation with The Rock, but we can't take it away from the fight, and we've got to let it continue. And I just think the action was just so overdone. I just, again, like, not that I didn't care, but it just, I'm in this lull state now where, I don't know. I mean, how did you feel with it? Sorry. I mean, I want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, with the action, I mean, as I said like earlier, it was like a toned down version of Man of Steel. Where like, because the film like Man of Steel shows how powerful Superman is in a good way because there is so much destruction. With Black Adam, there's not that much destruction, and he is supposed to be on that power level of Superman, strength wise. Like, there's nothing like big that happens to show he is that level. I mean, yeah, he fights Hawkman and beats his ass, like, and beats up Dr. Fate a little bit, and then that's about it. Like, there's no like forceful impact behind the action that like makes it interesting. It's just one of those. It's like, again, it's poorly done. It's like you said earlier. The Rock obviously came to DC and said, I want to do Black Adam, but like a Man of Steel film. And
Yeah.
obviously, there was no vision and there was no action. Like, yeah, there was just no action to it.
Even the director Jamie Collett Sarah, he directed Jungle Cruise.
Mm.
And I think Tom Cruise is one of these, but to me, Tom Cruise is a bit of an exception given his actual career. Certain actors can bring directors with them, not the other way
Mm.
around. And they bring an entourage. I'm going to be a lead. Here's one of my guys filling in with the directing role. And it feels like it was to this. Like this again, this for all intents and purposes is the Rock's own directed film. You can tell no one would have said no to him. Is there any creative decisions? No. It would have been the only no's would have been from Warner Brothers, which I think the big talk is they made it go to a 12A from a rated R or whatever.
Mm.
And Black Adam was never going to be, they're not going to introduce this character, put the Rock in a big. I think what's the budget for this? Like 200 mil. And I'm just going to make this comparison because I absolutely 195 million. That's $5 million less than Dune. And it's like, look at the films,
Yeah.
And I know it's unfair because you can compare everything to Dune. I think Black Widow had a higher budget than Dune, but when you look at an actual filmmaker and what they're crafting versus the nonsense that comes out of this, it's just so frustrating. And I think again, I've reached this point maybe the last year. There's not been even that many blockbusters recently, which kind of makes this. I've not been building up to hate on this. I don't normally go out after films, but it was just there like. It's another one I just don't care about. I'm not invested in. And how much more time do I need to see the awful red CGI Sabak villain thing? Like, it looked like a PlayStation cutscene. And I don't say that as a compliment or as a criticism. Like, when you're playing like a good game and then you'll have a villain fight scene and you're not in control. It felt like one of them. And his ultimate goal was to bring in the army of the dead. I'm like, brilliant. I've not ever seen that in a blockbuster film before. Who would have ever seen this coming? Like, it's just one of them where, again, tried and tested formulas, formats. They're at a point where I think the industry is slowly moving on. Again, this isn't me moaning and having a pop, but this film's made money. It's made $67 million this weekend for its opening weekend. It's The Rock's asterisk. The Rock's highest grossing opening weekend as the lead role. Look between the lines because he's not normally the lead role in the films that are lucratively, insanely successful at the box office. That, of course, you're looking at the Fast and Furious films or the Mummy films where, he's a supporting player and those films have made money. Now, I would argue that he did save the Fast and Furious films from where they were before he came on board at Fast 5. And I certainly argue there's been a lesser quality since he's left those films after the falling out with Vin Diesel. But it's one of them where 67 mil opening weekend, great. I want to see its numbers next week.
Yeah.
Because the second box office weekend these days is really where the real money's in. If you get like a 70% drop off, you're done. You're finished. It means everyone went on weekend one because they wanted to. If it's going to maintain and hold well, then we'll find out. But it leaves it in an awkward predicament for me, certainly with this film. I just want to ask you, how do you... I mean, I want to talk basically about Henry Cavill now, but is there anything you want to jump on some of the characters or the action stuff we've not spoken about?
No, apart from Hawkman, like Hawkman was the best part of the film. I think they could have done. I think at this point, if they are going to do more sort of DCEU films, do Hawkman as his own film, like an origin story. Introduce Hawkman and Hawkgirl, and if you want to get Pierce Brosnan back on board, show like fast forward, like do little bits, like do time jumps so that you can show some of Pierce Brosnan and Doctor Fate sort of story. But yeah, Hawkman, like if they're gonna do another origin one, do Hawkman and Hawkgirl, like make them their own film because they're so much more interesting as characters than a lot of other DC characters.
And the way he's working under Amanda Waller as well, it's like there's teams there, and it's when the Suicide Squad came out last year, right? The team was great that we were throwing these random names because we knew as an audience they're all going to die. This is going to be hilarious. Whereas this, because it was so obscure the characters they went with. Well, sorry, I keep yawning. For this film, it was like these are really important to us. but you've never seen them before, but they're going to be with you through to the end. And I really want to quickly talk about Atlas Smasher, played by Noah Centineo. I thought this was probably one of the worst ever characters I've seen in a DC film. He was playing Deadpool. They put Atlas Smasher in the film. They literally put him in a Deadpool mask and made him do terrible jokes, down with the kid, TikTok jokes, whatever it wants to be. I thought it was awful. And then I mean, I love Henry Winkler, the Fonz. His cameo was great. That one hadn't spoilt for me. That's probably my favorite cameo. But I'm also like, why is Henry Winkler in? Why is the Fonz in a DC film saying he was like the original? It's like the whole it's like Ant-Man, right? Like, oh, here was the other version. Here's an actor that played him before, but this was a comedy cameo rather than an actual like character. It just felt very weird, and I don't know the origins of why that came to be. But yeah, it's just I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm at a low.
That threw me for a loop as well. Like I was like, why is he playing? Why is it not the original Atom Smasher? Why have you had to make him the nephew or whatever the relationship is there? Like, can you just? I mean, we've never seen the Atom Smasher before, so just make him the original Atom Smasher. What's going on here? Like, yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, no, I'm with that. And kind of following on from that, let's talk the credit scene. Henry Cavill returning as Superman. When I found out the news, I cried a bit of sadness because this rules him out of playing James Bond, a role that he wants, a role that he is born to play. Whether it meant before he'd come back, he'd actually already been told he wouldn't be the next James Bond. So what's come out the last couple of days is that they've announced that they filmed an ending of this where, like Shazam, Superman would be in it with his head cut off. And they then, when Henry Cavill did sign on, they then filmed his on a green screen and got him into the film. So I'm trying to imagine this credit scene with Superman with no head. I think it would have been hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Because the Shazam one worked, right? Because Shazam's a comedy at forefront. The cameo was a comedic cameo. It's not showing Superman's head was funny. But for Black Adam, which is, again, the Rock Zone version of Shakespeare, him squaring up to Superman in the credit scene is his dream. It's bigger than him versus, John Cena, him bigger than him versus Hulk Hogan. His real battle is with Superman on the big screen. And you could just like smell the ego coming off the big screen because it's so contrived. And as we said before, like, not that you need to follow certain rules to do these films, but it is obvious that Black Adam's follow-up is to fight Shazam. We have the Council of the Elders or whatever they're called that pop up.
Council of Wizards.
Council of Wizards. They're there. They serve a function to a point, and then they're like, this is setting up a Shazam stuff, like Shazam was to set up Black Adam. And in turn, now it's no. I'm gonna get Superman in the credits scene, so I want Superman. And my brain thinks surely Henry Cavill's not going to pop up in a Black Adam sequel. Like, surely there's going to be sense amongst Warner Brothers or whoever is hired to run DC. But I was like, but why make this the cameo scene? And this is my question to you, am I overlooking the cameo? Am I thinking this cameo was them saying Henry Cavill's back? Or was this cameo saying they want Henry Cavill to fight The Rock?
I think The Rock wants Black Adam to fight Superman. I think the studio DC they were just confirming that Henry Cavill is back. But The Rock wanted Superman because again, like you said, his sort of tagline was the hierarchy of power is changing. And it's one of those, it's like in the comics, there are stories where, because in the comics, Superman's only weakness or one of the only weaknesses he has is magic. So, and Black Adam being magic, it makes sense, but don't do that straight away. Make Black Adam what they should have done, as we said after the film, like they should have had Shazam come out, then Black Adam, and then have a Shazam sequel with Black Adam.
Yeah.
Not Helen Mirren and whatever the other person is. But yeah, it's weird. I think it was just the studio confirming Henry Cavill is back, because that was all the articles that were written after it came out. Like, oh, Henry Cavill may be back, or Henry Cavill is back, and stuff like that. It's just, yeah, it was just them confirming Henry Cavill has signed on to play Superman again.
Yeah, I'm kind of with it. I think it is more. Again, it's the clash of ego, isn't it? It's the Rock's ego saying, I read it as the Rock saying he doesn't just want to fight Superman. He wants to be the main. He wants to be what Robert Downey Jr. is to the MCU's first three phases.
Yeah.
He wants to be the face of DC's cinematic universe. That's just not going to happen. And
No.
I think because of Fast and Furious, because of the fallout with Vin Diesel, until Hobbs and Shaw, where they all claimed he broke broke their trust, he broke their deals, he wouldn't do spin-offs. Obviously, there was no Hobbs and Shaw sequel. He's still not going to be in Fast 10 after falling out with Vin Diesel, and Vin Diesel publicly begging for him to go back on Instagram. It's very weird moving forward for The Rock now because, he's going to be in a sequel for Red Notice. I'm sure there'll be another Jumanji film down the line. He isn't going to stop working. But I'm very curious to see how this film's numbers do long term, to see if DC can warrant that. Can they do a sequel? Because you're going to be looking at like 400 mil worldwide for this to get a sequel green hit for me. To hit 400 mil, I think it need a very impressive few weeks before Black Panther comes out. Because when Black Panther comes out, nothing else is going to be seen. Yeah, nothing else will be watched at the cinema for those weeks moving onwards. And again, it goes back to that position of like, what is DC's strategy? What is their game plan? Now, what we do know, and if you want to observe ever so quickly about the future, we had a comment earlier. Someone talking about, let's have talk about DC. They want standalone films, not DCU films. We genuinely don't know the strategy. We know that David Zaslav, who's running Warner Brothers, is not fit for the role of running a film studio. He has TV industry experience, only no film industry experience. He's lost them $20 billion of stock. Walter Hamada has now left DC. Rightfully so. I think, if I'm being honest, with Black Adam, he left with this film as his final film. Now they are recruiting for a new head. But I'm just sat there saying, okay, well, if you're going to be the new head of DCEU, you need a reset to take place in your cinematic universe. Well, be great. We've got a reset in the Flash. Brilliant. Who's in the Flash? Ezra fucking Miller.
Yeah.
And this is where it all goes wrong. Again, Warner Brothers protecting Ezra Miller. Listen, if they need help, fine. Not a problem with me. You're going to be losing millions on that film. Lose a few more millions. Reshoot it. Pay people properly. Don't have a kidnapper, a cultist leader, Grand Theft Auto in Rush, whatever you want to call those crimes that have been on. Talking of an up to 26-year thing if he's found guilty on his trial they're in. All that sort of stuff is not going to help that film come out next year. And they've put all of their eggs in the basket for that. But unfortunately, it's a hollow basket and they're going to smash straight to the floor because it just can't be taken seriously, that film. And the position Warner Brothers are in, at times, I'd pity it, If you had a film coming out and you got an abuser or whatever in it, it's going to be awkward.
Yeah.
But when we've successfully seen films, oh god, what was the there was a Kevin Spacey one where they replaced him with Christopher Plummer with a few weeks' notice. Granted, it's cheaper, it wasn't a CGI superhero film, etc. But they got that film out and Christopher Plummer replaced Kevin Spacey, which was like an insane thing to do. But it was the right thing to do, right? And this is where I kind of sit in this logic now, is that you've got Aquaman coming out with Amber Heard next year. That's just going to bring up all the court stuff again. We've got Shazam, which is luckily relatively issue-free, which is great. And I hope it's okay, the film. I think it's January. Smart of Warner Brothers to move it away from Avatar, if I'm being honest. They made one good move there, but they are relying on the Flash to restore a DCEU that has no leader, that has no Justice League, that has actors popping in on a question mark at the in and the out. Are we getting Wonder Woman 3? We don't know. There's so many question marks around DC moving forward. It's hard to care. And although I might disagree with some of Marvel, I might be tired myself. I know I don't speak for everyone. I know I'm not everyone. I know there are people that are mopping it all up that are loving it, which is great. I love that they're investing in these franchises. But when Marvel say that a film's going to come out in 2025, at least you can expect it to come out that year. If it is delayed, it'll be a few months, if that. At least you know that their ideas are going to make it to the big screen, and they have a studio creative head in control planning those things. Whereas aside from Matt Reeves' Batman universe, nothing. There is nothing drawing me. Even the Joker 2, which I think is absolutely nonsensical. That I don't know how and why Joaquin Phoenix decided on to do a sequel. I actually love the idea as Lady Gaga as Margot Robbie. I don't even mind the fact it's a weird musical and there's going to be singing involved. But then I sit there saying, but why? Question mark. Like, why?
Yeah.
And that's sort of, I've spoken for ranted for ages. That's just how I feel with DC at the moment. That, you know, I don't know. I'm tired. I'm just. How are you with it all? Like, because it's so tricky moving forward for what they're going to plan.
Yeah, DC are in a weird state because they've got DC as a sort of not the DCU, but the DC as a whole. They have films that have worked, like Robert Pattinson as Batman, like Joaquin Phoenix as Joker, but then they've got so much dysfunctional stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Especially Ezra Miller being the Flash, and the Flash film going to be a Flashpoint, so they can restart. It's going to be to get people on board to watch that film now, where Ezra Miller has done the stuff that they have done. It's I mean, I'm under the thoughts that you're going to make a loss on it regardless. Just drop it on like streaming services. At least at that point, people can watch it, and you don't lose as much money. Because if you can't market the Flash film and have Ezra Miller as the star, you can't put him on the poster. You can't put them on the poster because it's not gonna draw people in. It's gonna detract them more than anything. So yeah, it's in a weird situation.
It's so naive for them to think people don't notice it or don't care or haven't seen the news. Like, not to get into sport, but it's like F1. Like we've had a legitimate world champion robbed a year ago. The team that robbed it have now officially cheated, and they're trying to pretend that no one in the world's organised it when they're getting booed every weekend at races. Like it's this weird like bubble of arrogance, and you know, I had something really good to say, but I've forgotten it. But just moving forward, sorry, what I was going to say comes up to my head, I'll bring it up. But it just makes it so much tricky to follow and support stuff when it just shouldn't have ever been in that situation to ever begin with. And I think it goes to show, you know, how wasted DC's been for a long period of time. Actually, here we go. I remember Batgirl.
Oh yeah.
You know, you had Brendan Fraser, who right now is one of the Oscar heavyweights. It's him, Colin Firth, and oh god, not Alden Ehrenreich, Austin Butler for Elvis. His comeback film is Oscar everywhere. He's filmed Batgirl playing a tragic villain in Firefly, I think.
Yeah.
And to cancel an entire film to get a little bit of a tax rebate, to wipe it from existence, that it can never be seen, it can never be released, it can't even be. Essentially, the only way it could ever come out is if it was completed and no one else was paid, and it went out for free on a service that cost nothing. That's legally the only way Batgirl could ever come out now. How, you know, listen, it could have been great, it could have been terrible, I don't care. People should have the option of seeing it. People that work on it should have the value of having their work seen. And the people that took months of their lives into roles or might have turned down stuff to do other things, that is a horrifying situation to find themselves in. And there's no solution. And I think as we go into the future again, we'll once again be sat here probably in 3 years' time saying, well, do you see what's improved? We did the same thing 3 years ago. 3 years before that. They've been playing catch up for over 10 years now, and they just don't know. They don't have the faintest idea what they're doing or what they're trying to do. And it's frustrating because there's so much potential. And as always, it just comes down to me, DC at least, wasting that potential. Even great stuff like Peacemaker. I know James Gunn said, you know, there's the second season's confirmed. Great. It just doesn't make any sense right now. But I'm just, at this point in time, I'm willing just to take all these projects and contextually view them as not being connected. Because I at least can understand that and find my own enjoyment within that. But if they're going to start crossing more things over, if they're going to be like, whoa, post Flashpoint, like Black Adam's head of the Justice League or some nonsense like that, I'm going to be so faced out. I don't even know what happened. But yeah, sorry, I've been waffling. But, you know, I've spoken about what I can say about this film, if I'm being blunt.
Hmm.
I don't have much to begin with. But if you've got anything else before we go into final thoughts, do just go for it now.
I mean, apart from the fact that the main thing that for me, like, I like Black Adam as like a character because he is interesting, and which is why I was interested in watching this film because I was interested on how they were going to do it. And then coming out of it, I was like, oh, okay, this is how it went. It was the Rock film, and it's disappointing because I don't mind the Rock as an actor. Like he's he's okay. Um, but yeah, this is just DCEU are in such a mess. Like I'm under the same pretense as you. It's like everything is not, nothing is connected. Like Peacemaker is its own show, even if they have little hints and nods to other DC characters. Like when Peacemaker was saying like, the Flash is a or whatever he is and stuff like that, or Aquaman fucks fish. Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's not Jason Momoa's Aquaman. That's just an Aquaman in Peacemaker's own universe. And then same with like Man of Steel. Like Henry Cavill is Man of Steel. He is Superman, but he's not the same Superman that's in the Black Adam film universe. They're all disconnected, which is what it should be at this point, basically.
No, it's very well said. And I completely forgot about the fish comment as well, which was a very weird moment. Again, Peacemaker, when they had the faces of
They had the bodies, but they didn't have the faces.
except was it Aquaman and Flash were the only two that they were legally allowed to show or something ridiculous like that. It was very odd.
Did they have them?
Or was it Cyborg? I can't remember.
I don't think that's Cyborg because
But it's just
Cyborg, the actor that played Cyborg, had that
yes,
problem, didn't he?
yeah. Actually, that's a good point. Yeah, no, very good point. So that's it, and that's kind of where we're at with DC. And it's just catastrophic at this point in time. But
Hmm.
I think if I head into my final thoughts on this film, I'm just going to be blunt. I thought this film was horrific, bar an interesting Pierce Brosnan subplot,
Hmm.
which I think had a lot of levity. Who I think actually he's one of the few actors that looked at this film and actually seemed to have given it a go. If anyone ever sees his press interviews, he is a very wise individual. He speaks so well and freely about ideas and concepts and so many things. I think he's a very fascinating individual. And I'm glad that his part was at least not a waste. I'd have been gutted if he was just wasted in the film.
Hmm.
But to me, at least he wasn't. So that's my only redemption is the Pierce Brosnan side of things is great. The rest of it, I just couldn't care less. It could exist in a cave. I'm never going to need to see this film again in my life.
Hmm.
That's how I feel with a lot of modern blockbusters, with this superhero facade. There's going to be a reckoning eventually where things change.
Yeah.
And I do wonder at
Hopefully.
what point would audiences have enough? And
Hmm.
That's why I'm so desperate to get next weekend's box office numbers. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. If you've got to the end of a 48-minute video and wonder what my thoughts on Black Adam are, fair play to you. Would I be recommending this film? No.
No.
There's so many good films out at the moment. There's a lot of films I haven't seen myself, but there are some absolute crackers. And I'd even give more respect towards films that maybe don't work as much, but at least they're original concepts and ideas that you could watch instead. I just think people can do better. Listen, if you love The Rock, I'm not going to stop you. If you love DC, I'm not going to stop you. You've probably already seen it if you enjoy both those things. But yeah, for me at least, monstrosity.
Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't be that harsh on it. I think it's a mid in the DC sort of like rankings. It's mid because it's not as bad as like Justice League or Zack Snyder's Justice League or stuff like that. But it's not Man of Steel. It's not. So it's not like Man of Steel or Suicide Squad levels of good. It's sort of mid, which is a shame.
No, that's fair. And yeah, that's gonna pleasantly do it for our review of Black Adam. Ayman, thank you for coming on tonight.
No worries,
I'm glad to have someone else that's seen it. But yeah, let us know your thoughts on Black Adam. Again, if you're watching down the line, if you've watched it, if you've not, if you're curious, do comment them. We'll bring up our thoughts. We're happy to have that discussion with you. Hey, maybe you love this film. This film is for you. Great. At least there'll be some people that get some enjoyment out of it. I know a few people that have really enjoyed this film, which is understandable too. So it's going to be very interesting, as I said, following this over the coming weeks. And for anything else you might be curious about, please do follow us on our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, @cinema_savvy, Facebook, and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. A link to Redbubble in the description where you can pick up our merch. If you want to know what else is happening on the channel, there's a lot of things. We've got Andor spoiler discussions coming every Wednesday, 9 p.m. We go live at the same time with a whole variety of people on there. So if you enjoy Andor, do check that out. We've got the Steven Spielberg retrospective popping up where every Tuesday we have a new episode. This Tuesday is the BFG, not everyone's cup of tea, as we get into some of the more modern stuff. But one that I know you'll be joining us on, Ayman, tomorrow night, House of the Dragon. We're going to go live at 10 p.m. BST for our spoiler discussion on the first series. The episode airs at 2 a.m. UK time.
Yep.
Tonight, 3 a.m. Finnish time. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m. We'll go through the whole season, characters we love, stories, all that sort of stuff. It's going to be a fun one. We're going to be live, and we hope we can get you all involved. So please do join us on that if you are a fan of House of the Dragon. I'm hoping that's a fun video. We've got a thumbnail and everything. There'll be a stream set up in the night. But aside from that, that's going to do it for today's review. As I said, thank you for taking time out to join me tonight. For everybody that's been watching with us at home, we hope you've appreciated it. And I didn't think I'd be talking about Black Adam for 15 minutes, but here I am. So once again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.